Ur is one of the most well-known and iconic cities of ancient Mesopotamia. It's a city that's steeped in history and seen the comings and goings of kings, empires, utter destruction, and rebirth over the course of millennia. Adherents of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam may know the city as the place where the patriarch and prophet Abraham was born. Though in ruins now, Ur was once a thriving port on the banks of a now long dried up part of the Euphrates River. Though many archaeologists believe the site to have been occupied since around 3800 BCE, some have put the foundations of Ur even far beyond that, perhaps at 5000 BCE. That's over 7,000 years ago, which is honestly extremely impressive and extremely old. For centuries, the ruins of Ur were buried below dunes of sand in what is today southern Iraq. It was essentially a mound that the local Bedouins called Tel el-Makayar. While the local people believed that a ruined city was indeed beneath all of the sand and rubble, none of them knew exactly which one or how far back the site had been occupied. Occasionally, the desert would turn up small, ancient artifacts such as pieces of ceramic, pottery shards, and hard clay tablets covered in a yet unidentified script. Some of the more, you could say, entrepreneurial locals in the mid and late 1800s began to sell such items to Europeans, who at the time were crazy for the stuff. The reason was because the field of archaeology, especially of the biblical lands of the ancient Near East, was becoming extremely popular in Europe. In 1854, an officer who was at the British consul in Basra at the time, John George Taylor, brought some of these artifacts to England. Upon closer examination by another officer, Henry Rawlinson, who would eventually be knighted and become Sir Henry Rawlinson, it was made clear that the site the artifacts had been taken from was indeed the ancient city of Ur. This was a huge discovery and increased further European curiosity of other such sites. However, it wasn't until the year 1922 that serious excavations of Ur began. The excavations were led by Sir Charles Leonard Woolley and lasted until 1934. Known for being one of the first modern archaeologists for using a more methodical approach, Woolley and his team created a new understanding of not just sites like Ur, but of the history of ancient Mesopotamia in general. So let's get into the history of the city of Ur. The earliest phase of Ur's existence was during the time period historians and archaeologists call the Ubaid period. This is due to a culture of the same name that inhabited the region during that time, which was sometime around 4000 BCE. It seems that the site was a basic settlement like any other, but around 2900 BCE, the foundations of a small temple had been laid. Over time, that temple was expanded into what became a ziggurat, which is a type of step pyramid. It was also around this time that newcomers to the region, those who called themselves Ur-Sagiga, but who we commonly refer to as Sumerians, showed up. During the time period in Mesopotamia called the Early Dynastic Period, or the years roughly between 2900 to 2334 BCE, the main platform of the ziggurat seems to have been rebuilt several times. A number of graves have also been discovered from this time period. 16 of these graves consist of chambers made of brick and stone that contain the remains of numerous groups of humans, the majority of which are believed to have been personal attendants and servants interred along with their masters. What's interesting, and also a bit disturbing, is that these attendants seem to have been sacrificed by their masters in the hope that they would travel with them to some sort of afterlife. Whether the people buried here are truly royalty is uncertain, but with a large assortment of gold and silver objects, jewelry, semi-precious stones, musical instruments, and fine furniture within these tombs, it seems pretty obvious that these people were of a very high status. After Ur's conquest by Sargon the Great in the 24th century BCE, Ur continued to be one of the most important cities of southern Mesopotamia. However, the city had an uneasy relationship with its Akkadian rulers and rebelled several times. One qualm that the people of Ur had was that the Akkadian language was promoted instead of the region's native Sumerian. Tensions got so bad that many Sumerian cities, including Ur, became hotbeds of resistance to the Akkadian regime. In the end, Ur suffered as a result of such rebellions, since it couldn't match the might of the Akkadian military. In one instance, Sargon's son Rimush claims to have destroyed it after a great revolt. While few doubt the severity of the response to such rebellions, it's hard to believe that the entire city was completely obliterated, as Ur would have been much too important to the Akkadians as one of their more established and primary ports, let alone the religious significance it held as the terrestrial home of the popular moon god, Nana. As powerful as they were, the Akkadians were not invincible, and their empire fell around 2200 BCE. However, by 2100 BCE, a new, native dynasty emerged in Ur that brought the city and the old Sumerian culture back to life. Historians and archaeologists have named this dynasty the Third Dynasty of Ur, and the time period which they ruled the Neo-Sumerian period. During this time, Sumerian was made the official language once again, and a whole corpus of literature, including epic poetry, was developed. Actually, everything and anything Sumerian was back in vogue again. It was also during this time that Ur, being the capital of this dynasty and the empire that emanated from it, reached its greatest height in terms of power and prestige. The founder of this dynasty was King Ur-Nammu, who ruled from 2112 to 2095 BCE. He embarked on an ambitious construction program to beautify the city with many buildings, including palaces and city squares. However, his most ambitious projects revolved around Ur's sacred precinct, where the old ziggurat was renovated and expanded. Ur-Nammu had 4 successors: Shulgi, Amarsin, Shusin, and Ibisin. One of the greatest threats to the Neo-Sumerian Empire came from groups of nomadic peoples called Amorites, who especially during the reign of Shusin began penetrating into Mesopotamia from the west and causing instability. The death blow to the dynasty came, though, when the Elamites from Susa, who in about 2004 BCE, under their ruler Kindatu, attacked and plundered the great city of Ur. They captured the last Neo-Sumerian king, Ibisin, and took him back to Elam. Despite the destruction caused by the Elamites, Ur wasn't destroyed for good. The Elamites were really only there for plunder, and didn't, or perhaps couldn't, hold on to the city. After they left, southern Mesopotamia was overtaken by various other rulers, including Amorites, Kassites, and more native Babylonian dynasties. Though its political significance had declined, Ur retained its prestige as being a great center of learning and Sumerian religion. It was during the rule of the Persian Achaemenid kings, from 550 to 330 BCE, that Ur went into its final stage of decline. The cause this time, though, was not due to war or conquest, but ironically, to climate change and overuse of the land, as well as the changing course of the Euphrates River. Due to this, many of the once great city's residents simply moved to greener pastures in other parts of Mesopotamia and the Near East. Thus, Ur's overall importance rapidly declined, and by 450 BCE, it's believed to have been mostly abandoned. And so ends the story of the great city of Ur. As always, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I hope you learned something. If you did, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more such videos. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time.